What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to another video. So today we have got a spare supercharger off the S4. This was originally one of the ones that came off the car before I got my ported blower. So as you can tell from the title of this video, we're going to be going over ported blowers for your S4. Now this can pretty much be applied to any other top mount supercharger car with a few benefits and gains that you can see from porting a turbo as well. But we're just going to be specifically talking about the B8 S4 supercharger here, and I'm going to go over the pros, the cons, and kind of some of the differences in everyone's port work and what makes every port job unique. So let's go ahead and cover how a supercharger works before we go ahead and talk about all the people who can port them and some of the gains and some of the bad things that can happen when you port your supercharger. So the easiest way for me to explain this is to kind of follow the path that the air is going to travel into your engine. So starting out, we have our intake, travels in through the air filter, goes up through your inlet tube, and then it reaches your throttle body. Let's remove this cover here. So here at the throttle body, right here, air is now traveled through here based off of your throttle actuator back here. It's going to basically, it's a flap that's going to open and close and allow a certain amount of air in. Once that air goes in, it's going to be forced in and sucked in from the top mount supercharger, which is where those screws are going to be underneath. Down in here is kind of where the rotors are going to be sitting. They go right here underneath the supercharger, or inside on the kind of the bottom half. Once that air is sucked in, it is then compressed, and then it is forced up and out on each side. It's going to pass through your two intercoolers. You have one on each bank. That's going to be the inlets right here for where the coolant passes through. And once that air goes through that intercooler, it's then cooled by the coolant, and then it's shoved into your intake ports where the runners are. So kind of a lot going on there, but now we can go ahead and talk about the benefits of porting your supercharger. So with this spare blower, you can see kind of that here we have one intercooler missing off of the supercharger, and here's one that is still inside. So if I spin this guy around, this is what's going to be facing the firewall side of the car towards the cabin of the car, and we have the good intercooler over here, and then we had what was a bad one. So a bad one, basically the intercooler, the core and the housing of it, I'm not exactly sure where it fails, but something internally on those intercoolers inside the supercharger, they crack and they cause leaking, which leaks into your intake ports along the intake manifold runners. So it kind of causes some pretty bad effects to your engine. You got coolant leaking into your intake port, so your mind can go wild on what could go wrong. Luckily, you can usually catch it beforehand. Now going over how you get power out of a supercharger when you port it. So when you're porting a supercharger, you basically want to port all of the areas that the air is flowing into and out of, allowing more air to be compressed and more air to flow out evenly. Sort of like a turbo, where you want to open up the largest amount so you can increase the CFM on that piece of hardware. So porting all through here, all down this housing, you can see that it's very thick. It's going to be a lot thicker in some areas along here. So a lot of these guys who port superchargers are taking a lot of time and research, going through countless kind of shells, looking at what they can do to port, and you can see a lot of gains from these. So a lot of people, the unique differences between each ported blower is the fact that most of them are handmade. So you're going to find a lot of differences. Typically, everyone porting blowers will port here inside, and if we flip this supercharger over, that where the intake runners are, this is another area that can be ported, allowing more air to flow out of here. So I hope that kind of helped you understand how the supercharger works, what porting actually does to it, allowing more airflow through the supercharger, and more airflow obviously means more power, but there's gonna be other things that you're gonna get other than just power and more air with porting your supercharger. pros of porting a supercharger. So, like I mentioned, you're going to get more air, more CFM, which inherently is going to give you a little more power. With that, you're also going to be getting a little bit cooler intake air temps, faster air, more air. It's going to keep things a little bit cooler. And again, with more air, less heat. So when I ported my supercharger, I saw a little bit cooler intake air temps. I would say it was like 4 to 5 degrees up at the top end, which is my maximum. So originally I was seeing kind of these crazy numbers. Now, anytime I get up in the higher RPM, I'm seeing about 150, and that is without any water meth injection. So ever since I have had the ported blower on the S4 outside, I haven't really had an issue with any more heat. I don't really see too much heat soak, and I don't really have too much worry of the intercoolers cracking anymore. Knowing that there's a lot more air flowing through there, I have a little bit more confidence in the supercharger and those intercoolers. So to kind of prove a point that with that more air and the less heat that you're getting from the ported blower, I have noticed that when I do dyno runs, my top end lines are very close together. In fact, my second run of my last dyno, I actually made more than my first, which is kind of weird to think because as you do more pulls, you're kind of generating a lot more heat in the supercharger, therefore more heat soak. That air is going to get hotter, it's going to expand, and you're not going to get that dense, cooler air into your combustion chamber, making a little bit less power every time. But we saw more horsepower on the second run, so that kind of further proves the point that porting your supercharger is going to be more sustained power with those more air and that cooler temps. Let's talk numbers about power. So when you port a supercharger, you're going to be seeing array of numbers because every port is unique, different porters. There's CNC porting, there's hand porting. You can even ceramic coat your supercharger to kind of keep the heat consolidated. There's many things that you can do. There's many different variations. To go over, I had my supercharger ported out on the S4 by Mike Bunton. He's out of Indiana, I believe, and he does a very good job. That is one of his first revision superchargers that he's ported. He's done many updates to his work and continues to improve every time. The S4 on E40 made 472 and 418, I believe, wheel torque. So pretty good for a hand port and for his first run of superchargers. And that is with the 034 Stage 2 Dual Pulley E40 software. So a lot that goes into it, but his port did a great job. There's other ports out there. There's Matty S4 who does an absolute killer job. He's been doing it for a very long time on the forums. He charges still a really good, reasonable amount. And then there's Tampa Autosport, who's now working on a new supercharger porting. And lastly, there's Brett over at Joker's Performance. He uses a 5-axis CNC port machine, and his ports are gonna be the absolute most precise just because they're not done by hand. You decide which one's best for you. There's convenience factor in it. A lot of these people who port superchargers can just send you one that's ready to get bolted onto your car, and you can have that done yourself. Some of them require a core exchange, so once you get that ported blower that's ready to go, put it on, slap it on your car, get everything bolted up, and then send your old one back to the porter so that they can kind of give you a little bit of a refund. I think it's between like $300 to $400 for each of them. So now if you wanted to have your supercharger ported by Mike Bunton, which I highly recommend, his new port work is coming out pretty soon here, and he's going to be doing an even better job. And I hope to give you guys a feedback on what his new style port will be because I'm going to be running it on the S4 and going to be redynoing in September. So I'm really stoked to see that. But to hear more about what his port does, go ahead and contact him. He is _mad_by_design on Instagram. He also has like a Facebook page where you can direct message him and he responds very quickly. But overall, his port, I believe it costs like $700. And if you wanted to do a full core exchange, or if you didn't want to do the core exchange, it's $1,100, so you don't have to send your supercharger back to him. That's all said and done. Comes with good intercoolers, ready to go onto the car. And if you wanted to kind of get to save some money, you can send your supercharger back. So it kind of makes things a little bit nicer, allowing you to kind of decide how you want to do it. Now let's go over some of the bad things that happen when you port your supercharger. I was waiting for something bad to happen, but there's nothing. There's no bad reason to port your supercharger other than like it costs it costs some money, which really does suck. Typically porting is gonna cost between like $600 to $700, all up to like $2 grand if you're going full Savage mode and you're gonna like coat this thing and do that 5-axis port like I was talking about. But for those who just want a simple little port, little hand port, just to get a little bit more power up top and to kind of cool everything down a little bit, a standard hand port is gonna be totally fine. You don't need to go full send on a port. It's kind of like talking about charge coolers. You got Merc Racing or PLM, makes some great quality reservoir radiators, charge coolers, and then you have people like AMS build these incredible components for your S4. I'm kind of a DIYer and I like to kind of do build on a budget. So Mike Bunton was the right call for me. I thought I'd give him a chance and it turned out very well. So like I said, that's pretty much the only downside is gonna be spending money on the ported blower. But however, I highly recommend it. If I was to say ported blower or meth, which is roughly the same cost, all said and done installed, I would really suggest a ported blower. Meth is definitely something that's gonna help you with your back-to-back runs if you're running at the drag strip, or if you live in like a super hot area and you're doing pulls all the time. But the ported blower, there's just kind of more of an ease of mind with it. There's less monitoring. You just kind of slap it on and you're good to go. Another factor that's gonna kind of suck with these is the installation itself. If you're gonna be paying a shop to do it, I believe shops quote about 4 hours for a supercharger replacement. Pretty basic tools that go into it, other than the fact that it's kind of a pain to get the belt off and onto the supercharger unless you have one of those crank tools. Everything else is standard, like Torx bits, but everything else is pretty straightforward on the installation of a supercharger. You just gotta kind of make sure that you take your time and label everything when you're taking it off because there's a lot of vacuum lines. But other than that, pretty straightforward on the install, so you can save some money there, or you can spend typically between like $400 to $600 to have a shop install a ported blower for you. And that's taking off and putting back on. So kind of to go over what we were talking about with the ported blower. So the pros of it is you're gonna lower those intake air temps. You're gonna get more power. You're gonna notice that power more at the top end as well. You're gonna get less heat generated in your supercharger because you have more air and you have faster airflow. I think that's 3. I wrote 4. More air, cooler temps, less heat, more power. There we go. We got 4 reasons why you should port your supercharger. Get out there, go contact them, figure out which guy's for you, and get those superchargers ported. This thing is so sick when it's ported. You make so much more power, and you can hear the supercharger more, which is always cool as well. So that's gonna be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you want me to talk more about individual parts on the S4 and the upgrades themselves, and kind of why you should do it versus why you shouldn't do it, because I really enjoy making these videos. So thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. See you on the next one. Peace out.